Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, he's on a mission to save the internet. We'll talk to Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. Why Kenya's Safaricom is teaming up with China's biggest commerce company, Alibaba. Plus,
I'm Scott Heidler in Thailand, the world's largest exporter of rubber. Global oversupply has caused the price to plummet, leaving farmers here scrambling to make ends meet. A subsidy program has been called by some as a quick fix because it misses the main issue. That story coming up.
it is a public square, a library, a doctor's office, a school, a cinema, a shop, and much, much more. The World Wide Web has turned 30. And its inventor, Tim Berners-Lee, has called on the world to build a better web. We'll have more from Tim in just a moment. But first, our technology editor, Mariana Hond, explains the impact of his invention over the past 3 decades.
It may be hard for many of us to imagine a time when you couldn't just log on to the internet and search the web. It's how many of us stay in touch, make friends, talk, search and share information. But 30 years ago, none of that was possible, electronically at least.
Wow, this is
British scientist Tim Berners-Lee. Back in 1989, he and other scientists were frustrated, unable to share the experiments and data stored on their many different computers. He proposed a system whereby information in one part of the globe was connected to every other part, easily searched, available to all, and not controlled by anyone. He published how to do it on this, the very first web page. That vision of universal connectivity became the World Wide Web. You might think of the internet on your computer or a device like this as akin to a library, somewhere you go to get information. But instead of books, you access data, more than 1 billion web pages. Problem is, the World Wide Web is so vast, you don't always know where to find what you want. So, much like asking a librarian, you use a search engine to type in your query. It's processed using a set of rules known as algorithms to then trawl through the masses of data on the web and find the best matches. Click on a link and it's like being taken to a book in that library, a global digital library that Berners-Lee envisioned would be accessible to all. 30 years on, half of the world is online. For Berners-Lee, that's a job half done. Connectivity for all is a human right, he says, and he's calling on governments to sign up to a global contract to protect people's rights and freedoms in the digital age.
Well, our economics editor Abid Ali had a chance to talk to Tim, the brains behind the net, last week. They kicked off the conversation with a look at the dysfunction affecting today's web.
It needs a mixture of things. So that's why we're talking about a contract for the web for the next phase, where it's called a contract because, in fact, part of it is companies. It's partly the platforms, partly companies that build these systems need to tweak their systems a bit so that to make the discussion more constructive. But also it's governments as well, and so companies and governments need to talk to each other. And also, as a third constituent, we've included the consumer, an all person. We feel they need to be discussed, partly because their rights are really important. We see that the web in the future should be more user-centric. Users could have more control of their data. And partly because, at the end of the day, if governments don't do what they're committed to do, or companies don't do what they should do, then it ends up having to be people protesting in the streets, people voting by changing the products they use, or people complaining to their government.
Has there any progress been made in reining in the power of the big tech companies?
It's interesting that one of the things people are concerned about is that once you're on with one company, then your information is stuck in there and you can't get it out. But in fact, well, to start with, the European General Data Protection Regulations, the GDPR, have said that actually if you're a company has information about you, you can get it out. You must be able to get it out. You must be able to check it as well and fix it if it's wrong. And so those regulations, even though they apply to Europe, I think they've had a massive effect changing the international conversation. And so, for example, as a result, since GDPR has come out in the EU, in 4 big companies in Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Microsoft, not all in Silicon Valley, but all on that coast, they produced a thing called the Data Transfer Project, DTP. It's a little-known project, but it is a commitment by those companies that you will be able to get your data, like your photographs or your contacts or whatever it is, out of one of them and put it into the other one, or just have it and run it on whatever software you want to do. So that's a big commitment. I think philosophically it's really interesting, because by committing to the Data Transfer Project, these companies are really saying, yeah, this is your data. That's how we are going to behave.
Tim, final question. What about government censorship? China has its Great Firewall, Russia has its own censors, and other nations are following. That's certainly not compatible with your ideals when you first started up the web.
Indeed. That's one of the oldest questions about the web. What about censorship? But initially, of course, building a great firewall around your country was really hard because the computers weren't powerful enough. Now it's relatively easy. So China maybe is the poster child for government censorship of particularly of other sources of information, but unfortunately, they're not alone. There are countries in Africa and the Middle East as well, which has pretty serious firewalls. So yes, this is, of course, a really big threat to the web. The web works because you can link from anything to anything. The web works because, it is actually independent of country. When you're reading a blog, you don't know where the other person who wrote it is at the moment, and it shouldn't matter. I think that's a really healthy thing for the world. I think that the value of it as a global open platform is hugely greater than what it would be if it were broken into national or continental chunks. And so, yes, I think we have to just, every time we see government censorship, we have to gently persuade the agencies in the relevant governments that they can survive people being exposed to the other point of view. We persuade governments that they can, that information about what's happened, history that they're not so proud of, actually is still important for their children to learn. And the political debate should be grounded in a good open access to good knowledge about the state of the world.
Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the World Wide Web, speaking to us on March 7th. Now, let's take a look at social media in one of the world's fastest growing economies, India. Twitter has dropped unverified political ads in the country ahead of next month's national elections. Al Jazeera's Fez Jamil reports now from New Delhi.
As hundreds of millions of Indians prepare to elect a new government, fake or misleading information has become a regular feature on social media. Now, for the first time, India's Election Commission is trying to crack down.
All provisions of Model Code of Conduct shall apply to the content being posted on social media by candidates and political parties.
Political parties here say they welcome the move to regulate social media, something they see as crucial for the democratic process.
The political system in this country is becoming more answerable because there are more questions coming on our social media. That's how important is our social media, and that's how it's going to influence our electoral politics coming even in this election.
But not everyone is as optimistic.
Indians are known for their tenacity and their capacity to bypass rules and to come across with innovative approaches of bypassing policies and standards.
Twitter has also begun cracking down on unverified political ads, but some legal experts don't believe it's enough.
We are going to see not dramatic results. We could see some encouraging results, but for this policy to be really successful, I think far more effort will have to be done.
As social media have flourished in India's politics, so have the online attacks. Those in the public eye are often the main targets, but it's not always coming from established parties. The victims of online attacks say individuals spreading fake news get their orders from higher-ups in different political parties.
It's a malaise that, that kind of flows right from the top to the bottom.
This journalist says he and others are regularly attacked online. In several cases, social media companies have failed to crack down, as was the situation with one of his female colleagues.
People were sending her vulgar pictures. Now she put those pictures plus the phone numbers of the individuals who were sending her. So Twitter threatened to suspend her account.
As political parties push their social media campaign this election, new rules meant to crack down on misuse will be put to the test.
Still to come on Counting the Cost, Boeing's entire global fleet of 737 MAX aircraft is grounded. But first, Thai farmers export more unprocessed rubber than anywhere else in the world. But as global prices fall, they are suffering. And as Al Jazeera's Scott Heidler reports now from the southern province of Krabi, critics say a government subsidy scheme is too little, too late.
For generations, the landscape of southern Thailand has been dotted with rubber plantations. It's known as the white gold that's tapped from the trees. But now in Krabi province, like many others, the farmers have been dealt a double blow by world markets and one dispute in particular. Global oversupply has driven the rubber price down 40% over 2 years. And the months-long trade war between the United States and China has severely cut China's need for Thai rubber. A rubber farmer since he was a boy, Prapat Kayao is struggling, but is skeptical of a subsidy program recently put in place by the military government.
The government tried to help us, but they just do it just to save face and fix the problem in the short term. They don't think about the long term. They subsidise the rubber farmers with $58 per 1,500 square metres. Of course, we want money, but we do not agree with this programme.
Some economists see the subsidies as a quick fix, as they're only a short-term benefit for some of the local farmers here. It does nothing to lessen their reliance on the global price of rubber. And what needs to happen next, they say, is more of a focus on innovation, advancing the industry here, less on exporting raw rubber. As Thailand heads towards its first election since the military coup 5 years ago, some question the government's motivation behind subsidies rather than investing in the future of the industry.
They don't have enough incentive, and they don't have a political view to do that. They just do something that's easy way, and then get popularity, because you're using public money. So, and then you go.
But the government defends the subsidy program as the only way they can work with the farmers.
If we don't have this program, the farmers don't come to talk with us. With it, they cooperate with the government.
Krabi is traditionally a stronghold for the Democrat Party, members campaigning out in the plantations. They say the current program is bad for the farmers and will bring it to an end if elected, although they'll guarantee a minimum price for rubber, but offer little detail of how they'll keep the industry going in the long term and how the people here will continue to live off their white gold.
Now, long before fintech, Apple Pay and Alipay became buzzwords, an unlikely part of the world was leading the charge in mobile payments. Now, M-Pesa, owned by East Africa's biggest company, Safaricom, has agreed a partnership with China's e-commerce giant Alibaba. The deal will help Safaricom customers use its mobile money services outside Kenya. M-Pesa has been operating now for more than a decade. Well, it's been credited with pulling some 200,000 people, or 2% of Kenya's population, out of poverty. In a world first, the Kenyan government used the mobile phone platform to sell bonds. Safaricom is worth $11 billion, and as Kenya's biggest company, accounts for 6.5% of the country's economy. Our economics editor Abid Ali caught up with Bob Collymore, the chief executive officer of Safaricom. He asked him about the social impact of M-Pesa.
Yeah, so we've got the anecdotal stuff and we've got the qualitative stuff, the quantitative stuff. So, anecdotally, we have increased the financial inclusion penetration in Kenya from around 23% to about 75%. And when you increase and deepen financial inclusion, the people who you actually capture in that space are the people who are rural, the people who are agricultural, the people who are poor, and largely the people who are women. So that's how one way we've measured it. We've also done some work with Georgetown University, which showed the numbers of people who've been brought out of extreme poverty because of M-Pesa. Every minute, there are 3,000 people who are receiving money on M-Pesa. There's 2,000 people who are paying their bills. There is 380 loans which are issued every single minute using M-Pesa.
So how important is the data that you collect from your customers to you?
Well, we don't really collect that much data from our customers. We're not really that smart in terms of managing big data. So the challenges some of our bigger brothers like Facebook and the social media people have got, we don't face. So, we provide a simple service. How do you enable people to conduct financial transactions when you're at the bottom of the bottom of the pyramid, using the most ubiquitous thing we have in Africa, which is the mobile phone. There's 444 million mobile phones in the country and in the continent, and there's a lot fewer bank accounts that exist today.
So how does your deal with Alibaba help you and your customers?
So, in the AliExpress area, we're actually following the customers. What AliExpress has attempted to do is to create a marketplace for Africans and for Kenyans to bring stuff in from China. And it happens all the time. You get on the flight from Nairobi to China, you see how many small traders are going over there to buy stuff. But the big problem they've got is how do they pay for it? A lot of Africans don't use or don't trust the use of credit cards. And so using M-Pesa, which is something which is so ubiquitous, 21 million Kenyans today are using M-Pesa every day, it helps those customers to conduct those transactions in a very seamless kind of way.
And M-Pesa has been rolled out to many other countries. The one country where it didn't quite take off was South Africa. Have you been able to figure out why that was the case?
I think in South Africa, it has a very advanced banking sector. I lived in South Africa for 4 years. A very advanced banking sector, and the penetration of banking down that pyramid is actually much greater than the penetration in other countries. The other thing is that M-Pesa actually addresses a very specific problem in Kenya when it was first launched. And if you try to do a lift and shift, you take the products from one country and put it in another country without addressing a problem or a challenge, then inevitably it will fail. And
another hot topic right this very moment is 5G. And when do you expect to roll that out in Kenya?
We're still working out on rolling out 4G. We expect 5G to come within the next 2 or 3 years.
Are you concerned by US fears that Huawei customers could be spied on in the future?
I think Africa needs to figure out for itself what it wants to do. The US has its own challenges with China, and Africa has a different kind of relationship. We have a very deep relationship with Huawei. They provide our billing system, they provide our core network, they will provide our 5G infrastructure. So we don't have the same challenges that the Americans have. But I think that's actually a much more complex geopolitical issue. We are just focused on the technological solution, and we've got and continue to have a very strong relationship with Huawei.
So you had no contact with the Kenyan government. Have they expressed any kind of concern about Huawei's equipment?
Well, Huawei is also a big vendor for the government of Kenya. The backbone fiber is being done by Huawei for the government. Huawei were the vendors that we use to build out the security infrastructure. So the government of Kenya don't really have a problem with that.
Bob Collymore, CEO of Kenya's Safaricom. In northeastern Kenya, environmentalists are campaigning against a major construction project which they say is taking place on stolen land. But the government has accused activists of standing in the way of progress. Zain Basravi reports.
Kenya's leaders say it's East Africa's most ambitious infrastructure project. The Lamu Port and Lamu Southern Sudan-Ethiopia Transport Corridor, or LAPSET, is worth an estimated $24.5 billion. It includes the construction of a deep water port, highways, oil pipelines, railways, airports, and even 3 luxury resorts. Lamu Port will be the main hub, connecting Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Sudan to the Indian Ocean and to the world.
I feel great to be one of the people that contributed towards the construction of Lamu Port. And to me, it's something that's a big deal because this is something that is historic in our country.
Work started in 2013. When it's finished, it's hoped the port will become a major source of revenue. But not everyone is happy with the project. Activists say it will damage the environment, and the government is not properly compensating people for their land, leaving indigenous communities to pay the price for Kenya's progress.
The rights that we are crying are violated here in Lamu. If the government want to solve them, it's only 20 seconds. Only 20 seconds.
For years, Lamu's people relied on fishing and tourism to earn a living. The port means a major shift, and instead of speaking to them, community leaders say the government is steamrolling them. But Kenyan leaders say the LAPSET project is being done by the book and accuse activists of working against the national interest, and in some cases even labeling them as terrorists. A recent Human Rights Watch report said people campaigning against the project faced intimidation, beatings, arbitrary arrests, and detentions. One longtime activist turned politician said, in Kenya, government suppression is nothing new.
And in Lamu, the government is the terrorist. It's not the people, it's the government. Lamu has been left behind because of development. There's no development, there are no roads, there are no public health facilities, there's zero government involvement on the ground. And now this project is not going to improve the lives of Lamu people, it's going to affect them. There's going to be pollution, it's going to affect fishing, it's going to affect tourism, it's going to affect every facet of their life.
Projects like Lamu Port are central to President Uhuru Kenyatta's development agenda. He's promised all Kenyans that things will get better in 2019. But in Lamu, the pace of progress may mean some Kenyans get left behind.
Finally this week, Boeing's entire fleet of 737 MAX jets is grounded. The plane's the company's bestseller, but US aviation regulators now believe that crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia displayed worrying similarities. Al Jazeera's Rob Reynolds reports now from Boeing's aircraft factory in Renton, Seattle.
Globally grounded, the entire fleet of all 371 Boeing 737 MAX airplanes are being taken out of service following 2 unexplained crashes less than 6 months apart. The U.S. was the last country to ground the planes. President Donald Trump made the announcement.
We've had a very, very detailed group of people working on the 737-8 and the 737-9 new airplanes. We're going to be issuing an emergency order of prohibition to ground all flights of the 737 MAX 8 and the 737 MAX 9. Any plane currently in the air will go to its destination and thereafter be grounded until further notice.
The U.S. carriers American Airlines and Southwest have dozens of 737 MAXs in their fleets. Trump's announcement came hours after Canada's transport minister said his country's airlines would no longer be flying the aircraft after an analysis of satellite data found similarities between the Lion Air crash in Indonesia in October and the Ethiopian Airlines disaster. A total of 346 people were killed in the 2 crashes.
As a result of new data that we received this morning, and had the chance to analyze, and on the advice of my experts, and as a precautionary measure, I am issuing a safety notice.
Boeing issued a statement saying that out of an abundance of caution, it had recommended to the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration the temporary suspension of operations of the entire global fleet of 737 MAX aircraft. The flight data recorders retrieved from the Ethiopian Airlines crash will be processed in France. That's an unusual departure from the normal protocol in an accident involving a plane that was built in the United States. Ethiopian officials reportedly declined to hand over the black boxes to U.S. authorities.
And that's our show for this week. If you'd like to comment on anything that you've seen, you can tweet me. I'm at @afinnegan on Twitter. Use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or you can drop us a line. Counting the Cost at aljazeera.net is our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, even entire episodes for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.